want to pay attention to very important aspect of math that affect our everyday life. So we'll be looking at variation. So variation has different types. So in this particular video, we'll be looking at the direct variation. So when you talk about variation, you are looking at how things vary. Okay. Actually, the variation, you are looking at two things. If one varies, how does it affect the change of the other one? So some could be direct in the sense that if the other one increases, it will affect the increment of the other one and vice versa. So let's look at typical example. If you have a poultry, then you have number of birds now. So let's say that one bird, so you have one bird, this one bird yields 5 eggs. Okay? Then you have that when you have 2 birds, you see the number of eggs will increase. So if you have 2 birds now, the number of eggs will increase. So you now have 10 eggs. Supposing you increase your birds to 3, so you now have 3 birds. So the eggs will keep on increasing. You have maybe 15 eggs. Then supposing you increase to 4 birds, you'll be having maybe 20 eggs. So the eggs laid will be increasing in that proportion. And also maybe you stopped at 5 birds. Then you have a corresponding increment in the number of eggs laid. So you have 25 eggs. So what are we saying? If you look at this, this is a direct variation because you are comparing the number of birds with the number of eggs. So the more birds you have, the more eggs you will have. So you see that the increment is in the same direction, or the change is in the same direction, and that's what we call it a direct variation. And as you can see, there is something is varying. So you started from one bird to 2 eggs to 3 eggs, to 4 birds to 5 birds. So the number of birds are varying. Then, and the variation is in the increment, so it is increasing. So as your bird is increasing, you see also the number of eggs being laid is also increasing. So this one is direct, and call it a direct variation. Then, in this kind of thing, when you talk about variation, something has to be constant. For instance, let's look at this ratio. If you are looking at the ratio of bird to eggs, so supposing you have this ratio now, you have ratio from 1 bird. If you consider a ratio of 1 bird is to 2 birds, so I have, what this means actually is the same as 1/2. So you are comparing 1 bird, you compare 1 bird to 2 birds, so you have 1/2. Now this will also correspond to the ratio of the eggs. So here you consider 5 is to 10, and this 5 is to 10 is the same thing as saying 5/10. So you now have that 1/2 is equals to 5/10, and this is indeed correct because 5 divided itself 1 divides 10 gives you 2. So this is half. If you also compare, supposing you say you compare the ratio of 2 birds to 3 birds, so you now have 2/3. Then this will correspond to what? To 10 eggs to 15 eggs. So that becomes 10/15. And 10/15, you see that will give you 2/3. Because 5 divided this one gives us 2. 5 divides 15, it gives us 3. So this is 2/3. So this is the constant. So when you talk about variation, something must be constant. Now, how do we represent variation, in particular direct variation? We want to see how do you represent direct variation mathematically. So when you talk about variation, so we use this sign to represent variation. So now if I want to say the number of birds, I'm talking about birds, so let me represent it with capital B. So it means that the number of birds varies directly with the number of eggs. So I use E to represent the number of eggs. So the number of birds varies directly with the number of eggs. To write this mathematically, I use this sign to represent it. So B means the number of birds, then this one means varies directly with the number of eggs. So that's how we write it mathematically. Then from this now we get our formula. We are going to change this variation to equality in order to get our formula. So to do that, we now say that B will be equals to something, and what will it be? It becomes equals to the constant times E. So this is the formula you use in working this kind of a situation. So if you want to replace this with now equality, you must introduce that constant, which I have explained. So there must be a constant always. So in the subsequent video now, we'll look at more formal examples.